Imagine waking up one day with everything you ever wanted, peace, comfort, love, and stability laid before you like a perfect banquet. No unmet needs, no wild cravings, no chaos, and yet for reasons you can't explain, a quiet anguish lingers beneath the calm. A restlessness that thrums just beneath the skin. An ache that has no name, no cause, and no obvious cure. You try to rationalize it. Maybe I just need more excitement, you say. Or, maybe I need to find my purpose. But the more you chase meaning, the more it evades you. The moment you grasp at satisfaction, it slips through your fingers like smoke. You begin to suspect something deeply unsettling. What if suffering isn't just a side effect of life, but the very engine behind it? Every goal you've ever set, every desire that's pulled you forward, every achievement that felt so glorious for a fleeting moment, what if all of it was just suffering wearing a different mask? What if what you call progress is merely the temporary relief from a deeper, permanent torment? You eat not because you're fulfilled, but because you're hungry. You work not because you're joyful, but because you're afraid of failure. You love not purely, but because loneliness terrifies you. What if the foundation of human behavior is not joy, but the frantic attempt to escape pain? And more chillingly, what if we don't really want to escape it at all? What if we cling to suffering like a cherished possession because, deep down, we believe it's all we deserve? Schopenhauer, the famously pessimistic philosopher, dared to look this possibility in the eye. To him, the will, this primal blind force that pushes us to strive, to crave, to suffer is not our greatest asset, but our deepest curse. We are not rational beings pursuing happiness, he said. We are puppets of an invisible will, condemned to chase desires that once fulfilled give rise only to new, sharper ones. Desire, fulfillment, boredom, desire again. The cycle spins like a cruel Ferris wheel, trapping us in its rotations. And even when you think you've escaped through love, fame, wealth, even spiritual enlightenment, the will finds another form to possess you. But Schopenhauer didn't stop at despair. In the darkest corner of his philosophy, he offered something extraordinary, a key, a quiet, radical, almost monastic path to freedom, a cure not for temporary sorrow, but for the very structure of human suffering. But here's the twist. His cure does not involve happiness, not in the way most people understand it. It is not about achievement or self-love or creating a life you adore. It's about unhooking yourself from the illusion of wanting at all. Can you even imagine such a thing? A life not driven by craving, a consciousness not yanked forward by unmet needs or backward by regrets? And here lies the great paradox that may haunt you long after this script ends. To stop suffering, you must stop wanting. But to stop wanting? Don't you have to want it first? The modern world has no patience for this idea. Everywhere you look, you're told to hustle harder, dream bigger, manifest more. But Schopenhauer whispers a dangerous, forgotten alternative. Stop. Detach. Empty. Could this be the only real rebellion left in a world intoxicated by the will? You've felt it before. That strange peace when you finally let go of something you once desperately needed. The relief when a dream dies and the noise quiets. The serenity that creeps in when you no longer care whether you win or lose. That was not failure. That was freedom peeking through the cracks. So now the question becomes, if the will is the source of our suffering, what happens when we no longer obey it? The will, the root of suffering, operates not through logic, but through compulsion. It is not something you choose, it is something that chooses you. Schopenhauer saw it not as an individual drive, but as an all-pervading metaphysical force, a blind striving that animates everything from the mating rituals of insects to the torments of human ambition. In his eyes, the will is the underlying current of existence, surging beneath the facade of civilization, intellect, and morality. It is the urge to live, the urge to reproduce, the urge to dominate, to feel pleasure, to avoid pain. And unlike reason or morality, it cannot be bargained with. It is irrational, insatiable, and deeply embedded in the nervous system of every living creature. But Schopenhauer's insight went deeper than just identifying this will. He recognized something psychologically corrosive about the way it manifests in humans, especially in the modern, self-aware mind. Because we are conscious of our suffering, we suffer twice. The tiger feels hunger and acts. The human feels hunger and then questions it, magnifies it, resents it. We invent narratives around our pain. We give it meaning. We tether our identity to it. You don't just lose someone, you tell yourself you'll never be whole again. You don't just fail, you decide you're worthless. The will doesn't just make you hurt, it makes you believe that you are your hurt. This, Schopenhauer realized, is the great trap. We fuse our sense of self with our suffering. We become loyal to our wounds, addicted to our cravings, proud of our tragedies. We carry pain like a sacred emblem because, without it, we fear we would be no one. Nietzsche, Schopenhauer's philosophical descendant and rival, would later write, "Man does not strive for happiness, only the Englishman does that." What we really seek is intensity, drama, meaning. Even if it costs us peace, even if it tortures us, we would rather be tormented with meaning than tranquil in emptiness. But why? Because the alternative is horrifying. To truly let go of the will to detach from desire, craving, ambition, the endless cycle of striving requires confronting the void, the silence, the nothingness, and for most, that feels like death. Jean-Paul Sartre called this the nausea of existence, that gut-churning vertigo we feel when we look too deeply into life's meaninglessness. He believed we were condemned to be free, burdened by too much awareness and not enough guidance. Schopenhauer, on the other hand, believed we could transcend the will, but not by achieving more, not by solving suffering, but by understanding its illusion. He turned to the Buddhist concept of dukkha, the suffering that arises from attachment, craving, and impermanence. And like the Buddha, he saw renunciation not as defeat, but as liberation. This renunciation wasn't about becoming passive or nihilistic. It was about seeing desire for what it truly is, a trick, a mirage that keeps you running, in circles, forever unsatisfied. To renounce the will is to finally stop chasing the horizon. But let's be honest, it's not that easy. Even when you understand this intellectually, your body still trembles when you're abandoned. Your pulse still races when you fail. Your pride still swells when you win. The will is not just a thought. It's an instinct, a reflex, a fire burning at the core of your nervous system. Psychologists now confirm what Schopenhauer sensed intuitively centuries ago, that our minds are deeply wired for loss aversion, status anxiety, and hedonic adaptation. We feel pain more vividly than joy. We compare ourselves constantly. And even after massive achievements, we return to a baseline of discontent. The self-help industry thrives because it promises to help you feed the will without naming it. More success, more discipline, more productivity, more fulfillment, more you. But the end game is always the same. Feed the beast, feel the emptiness, then feed it again. Schopenhauer would laugh at the idea of becoming your best self. He would ask, what if your best self is the problem? What if the highest form of consciousness is not to amplify the self, but to dissolve it? In his later works, Schopenhauer proposed 3 potential escape hatches from the tyranny of the will: aesthetic contemplation, moments of pure beauty or artistic immersion, where the self momentarily dissolves and the will is silenced; compassionate ethics, feeling genuine empathy for others, breaking the narcissistic cycle of individual suffering; asceticism, a radical turning away from desire itself, the rejection of sensual pleasure, ego, and even individuality. Each of these paths involved a sort of disappearance of the self, a loosening of the identity that is so deeply entangled with wanting and suffering. This isn't just theory. Neuroscience now supports some of these ideas. Studies of meditation, flow states, and ego dissolution show dramatic changes in brain activity, reduced default mode network engagement, increased compassion, decreased attachment to outcomes. But again, the paradox remains. To escape the will, you must want to escape it. And so the will disguises itself even as it pretends to destroy itself. The ego says, I want to be free of ego. Desire says, I desire to be desireless. You begin to see the impossibility, the joke, the loop. Yet even in that impossibility, there is a glimmer of hope, a stillness, a detachment, a kind of cosmic smirk. You don't have to conquer the will. You only have to see it clearly. And in that seeing, something shifts. A space opens. A silence deepens. A possibility emerges. You walk through life assuming you're free to choose, to strive, to succeed. But what if that freedom is only a mask? And beneath it, you're being puppeteered by something invisible. The will doesn't scream. It whispers. And so its greatest trick is not pain, but subtlety. It doesn't always drive you into addiction, despair, or dramatic breakdowns. Often, it shapes your life in ways you don't even notice, through quiet dissatisfaction, low-grade anxiety, and the endless itch of not enough. You scroll through social media not because you're seeking joy, but because you're avoiding stillness. You chase validation, not because you want connection, but because silence makes you feel like you don't exist. You fill your calendar not to live fully, but to outrun a haunting question. What am I if I stop doing? This is the true danger of the will. It doesn't just make you suffer. It convinces you that suffering is normal. It teaches you to call your slavery by the name of passion. It dresses up your compulsions as dreams. The will makes you mistake intensity for meaning. That electric high of falling in love, it's not peace, it's possession. That rush of ambition, it's not purpose, it's panic in disguise. Even your acts of kindness, your generosity, your artistry, they are not exempt. The will wears every mask. It says, be good so people love you, create so you matter, sacrifice so you feel righteous, and you obey. But something inside you, a faint but ancient whispers, suspects the truth. You sense it in moments of eerie calm, when you're alone in nature, when the phone dies, when the to-do list is done. That unsettling feeling that what you've built your identity on, your goals, your image, your endless becoming, might be just smoke on glass. Schopenhauer understood this existential vertigo. He saw that the will didn't only distort individuals, it built entire civilizations. Consumerism, the industrial engine of desire, romanticism, the glorification of longing, capitalism, the weaponization of scarcity. Each system whispers, you are incomplete. But for a price, you can be whole. We call it growth. We call it freedom. But we've simply refined the art of feeding the will without ever asking if it's worth feeding at all. And so we design a world that is incompatible with peace. A world where success means never stopping, where joy is always deferred, where silence is terrifying. We raise children to chase dreams, but we never ask why those dreams matter. We treat boredom as failure. We glamorize burnout as sacrifice. We worship ambition, yet loathe contentment. Because contentment is still, and the will cannot survive stillness. But this sickness has symptoms. Look closer. We are more connected than ever and more alone. More entertained and more numb. More educated and more lost. The epidemic of anxiety, the explosion of depression, the rise in suicide, not just among the desperate, but among the successful, these are not coincidences. They are signs, cracks, warnings. People are beginning to suspect that something is deeply wrong, but they keep looking in the wrong places for answers. They change careers, relationships, diets, routines. They run marathons, start businesses, move countries. But the gnawing feeling doesn't leave because it's not outside them. It's inside. It's not the job. It's not the partner. It's not the city. It's the will. And most devastating of all, the more you chase a solution from inside the will, the more you deepen its hold. You feel the panic, so you strive harder. You feel the void, so you build more. You feel the ache, so you meditate, renovate. You become obsessed with healing, but the obsession is just another form of craving. Even spiritual seekers fall into this trap. They try to transcend the ego while feeding a spiritual identity. They meditate to gain power, fast to feel superior, renounce desire in order to achieve enlightenment. It's the same loop, different costumes. So, how do you know if the will still owns you? Ask yourself, if everything stopped, your goals, your relationships, your progress, could you be at peace? If no one saw your success, would you still strive? If your suffering was not special, would you still protect it? If joy meant doing nothing, would you allow it? These questions are terrifying because they reveal the quiet truth. We don't fear suffering. We fear its absence. Because without it, who are we? Without the hunger, what moves us? Without the narrative of struggle, what defines us? And yet, Schopenhauer believed that only by facing this abyss, naming the will, by recognizing its total hold, can we begin to unravel its spell. But to do so requires something most people never give themselves: stillness, reflection, silence. Not to achieve, not to become, but to observe. The will thrives in movement. It dies in stillness. And if you can sit long enough, quiet enough, you may begin to hear something beneath the noise. A different rhythm, a different truth. Not the voice of the will, but the voice that exists before it. The one that says, "You are not what you chase. You are not what you fear. You are not what you achieve. You are simply here." And that may be the most radical realization of all. You've spent your life believing that progress means movement, that growth demands hustle, that peace is a prize you earn only after the fight is over. But what if the fight itself was the illusion? To rebel against the will is not to run faster. It is to stop running at all. That is the revolution Schopenhauer offers. Not in the streets, not in systems, but in the still chambers of the human mind. But how do you stop running when your entire identity is built on motion? Start small. Start with seeing. The first act of rebellion is recognition. To realize that what you call your drive may actually be your chains, that your need to be more might be a subtle form of self-hatred, that the suffering you carry like a badge may, in fact, be the thing keeping you from truth. Awareness is not healing, but it's the doorway, and you must step through it willingly. Schopenhauer pointed to 3 radical methods to silence the will, not as quick fixes, but as quiet detonations of the illusion we call selfhood. Have you ever lost yourself in music? Not danced to it, not studied it, but disappeared into it so completely that your sense of I vanished, and only sound remained? That's not just pleasure. That's escape from the will. Schopenhauer believed that art, when pure, suspends desire. It lifts you out of craving and places you into pure perception. You are not thinking, not wanting, not becoming. You are being without effort. When you lose yourself in a painting, a novel, a symphony, you are not achieving anything. You are experiencing without judgment. You are no longer a subject chasing an object. You become, for a moment, the absence of pursuit. This is not distraction. It's transcendence. And that momentary silence, that's who you really are. In a world obsessed with self-optimization, compassion seems weak. But Schopenhauer saw it as the most powerful weapon against the will. Why? Because compassion requires you to see yourself in others, to dissolve the illusion of separation. And once you realize that their suffering is your suffering, the ego begins to lose its grip. The will thrives on distinction. Me versus you, mine versus yours, win versus lose. But when you feel true empathy, when another's pain stirs your own heart, you escape the loop of personal craving. You are no longer driven by your own hungers, but moved by shared humanity. This isn't morality for the sake of virtue, it's metaphysical rebellion. To love others deeply is to admit, I am not the center. I am not the only one who suffers. I am not the only one who matters. In that admission, the ego crumbles, and in that crumbling, the will begins to fall silent. The final and most misunderstood path is asceticism, not as denial, but as clarity. To the modern mind, asceticism sounds like punishment, starving yourself of joy, abandoning the world, living in cold silence. But Schopenhauer's vision was subtler, to see desire clearly enough that you no longer believe its lies. This is not repression, it's revelation. When you no longer believe that pleasure will save you, you don't need to fight it, you simply stop chasing. When you understand that every craving is a new leash, you begin to unhook them one by one, not out of force but from insight. You eat without indulgence, you work without obsession, you love without possession, not because you have to, because you're finally free not to. The modern application, a quiet inner exit. But how does this rebellion translate into a life surrounded by noise, screens, ambition, and identity? You don't need to become a monk. You need only to begin watching. Each time you feel urgency, pause. Each time you crave validation, question it. Each time your mind says, once I get this, I'll be happy, ask, who is speaking? This isn't passive detachment, it's active disobedience. It's the moment you decide to leave the battlefield, even if everyone around you is still fighting. You can be in the world, but not of the will. Work because you love the process, not because your worth is on the line. Love because it expands you, not because it completes you. Rest not as a reward, but as your birthright. This is not about becoming perfect or enlightened. It's about seeing the trap and refusing to tighten the noose. And when others ask what you're doing, why you're not panicking, not grinding, not chasing, you'll have no easy answer. Because the rebellion isn't loud, it's silent, internal, personal. You'll know you've begun it when a delay doesn't shatter you, a loss doesn't define you, a victory doesn't inflate you. You'll know because you'll begin to feel something strange, not happiness, but lightness, not the thrill of gaining, but the grace of not needing. And from that stillness will come something deeper than success, status, or satisfaction. Something ancient, something true, something that can never be taken from you because it was never something you owned. You awaken not from sleep, but from illusion. The noise has stilled. The cravings have fallen silent. The great engine that once roared inside your chest, the endless becoming, the reaching, the yearning has stopped. And what's left is not emptiness. It is peace. Not the kind you feel on vacation. Not the fragile kind that vanishes when things go wrong. This is deep peace, the kind that holds even when the world shatters. The kind that emerges not because life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. This is the space beyond the will, and to reach it is not to become more, but to become less entangled, less defined, less obsessed with being someone, achieving something, fixing everything. Because now, at the edge of understanding, you see what Schopenhauer hinted at but never fully said. The will was never you. It was a force ancient, blind, and universal that moved through you but did not define you. You were never the hunger. You were the sky holding the hunger. You were never the suffering. You were the awareness beneath it. You were never the story. You were the silence that listened. And here lies the ultimate truth, so quiet, so unsettling, so liberating that most will run from it their entire lives. You do not need to be anything to be free, not healed, not successful, not admired, not complete. Freedom is not something to earn. It is something to remember. Because all this time, you were not trapped in chains. You were trapped in dreams, the dream of becoming worthy, the dream of fixing yourself, the dream of finding something outside to fill the inside, and now you're waking up. This is the paradox. All the suffering you endure, every craving, every fall, every night spent hollow was not a mistake. It was the very path that led you here. The will, in all its violence, forced you to search. And in searching, you stumbled into truth. Suffering became the womb of wisdom. The hunger became your teacher. The pain became your guide. And now you can finally bless the very thing you once cursed. The will. Not because it was good, but because it broke you open. That is Schopenhauer's secret. He wasn't asking you to hate life. He was asking you to see through it. He wasn't saying, don't feel. He was saying, feel so deeply that you reach the bottom and then let go. He wasn't selling despair. He was offering liberation, not in the form of joy, but in the form of release, a freedom beyond fulfillment, a stillness beyond satisfaction. And now, your story changes, not because you fixed everything, but because you no longer believe you have to. You may still work, love, grieve, hope. But now, you do it without clinging. You participate in life as a dance, not a war. You hold things lightly. You move with care, not craving. You no longer chase meaning, you allow it to rise. And when fear comes, you welcome it like an old guest. When desire stirs, you smile and let it pass. When loss arrives, you bow your head and whisper, even this. This is the final gift. You do not need to escape the will. You only need to stop mistaking it for your identity. You only need to see it as a wave and remember, you are the ocean, still, infinite, watching. You are not the one who suffers. You are the one who sees. And in that seeing, everything changes. Cinematic closing, poetic reflection. Somewhere, beneath all your striving, behind every goal, every ache, every whisper of not enough, there is a room, a silent room with no mirrors, no clocks, no names. And in that room there is nothing to prove, nothing to become, nothing to want, only you, the real you, untouched by story, unshaken by time. And if you sit there long enough, if you dare to be still, you may hear it, not a voice, not a revelation, but something deeper, a knowing that you were never broken, that there was never anything to fix, and that freedom was never somewhere out there, it was here, always, beneath the will, beneath the wanting, beneath you.